Somewhere, right now, someone is reading a personal finance article that tells them to save 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund. It's solid advice. It's also almost completely useless because nobody ever tells you what that number actually is in dollars. And most people have no idea how to calculate it, so they just don't. They read the advice, nod, feel vaguely guilty, and close the tab. Meet Priya. 29 years old, works as a dental hygienist, makes $51,000 a year. For 3 years, Priya has read some version of that same 3 to 6 months advice probably a dozen times. She's never once sat down and calculated her actual number. Not because she's lazy, but because 3 to 6 months of expenses sounds like homework, and nobody wants to do homework about their own financial vulnerability. Here's the thing almost nobody talks about. For a lot of people earning something close to an average income, when you actually do the math, that vague rule resolves to something remarkably specific. $15,000, not 10, not 20. $15,000 is where the vague advice becomes a real, concrete number for someone spending an average amount on essential monthly expenses. But here's what almost nobody says out loud. That number is an average, and averages are built by blending people who spend more than you with people who spend less than you. Your real number might not be $15,000 at all, and figuring out your actual number, not the average one, is the entire point of this video. I'm Ellie, and I make videos about the numbers behind the decisions everyone assumes are obvious, but usually aren't. If you've ever read Save 3 to 6 months of expenses and immediately felt your brain slide off the sentence because it's too vague to act on, stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to calculate your own real number, not someone else's average. Hit subscribe if that sounds useful. Let's start with where $15,000 actually comes from, because this isn't a number I'm pulling out of thin air. National spending data puts average household essential expenses, housing, food, transportation, insurance, utilities, minimum debt payments, at somewhere around $5,000 a month. 3 months of $5,000 is $15,000. That's the whole math behind the number you keep seeing repeated. It's not magic, it's just 3 times an average that may or may not describe your actual life. Priya sat down and did her own version of this math for the first time, and it took her about 20 minutes with a bank statement and a calculator. Her real essential expenses, the ones that don't stop even if her paycheck did, broke down like this. Rent, $1,200. Car payment and insurance combined, $400. Groceries, $350. Utilities and phone, $200. Minimum payment on a small student loan, $180. Health insurance premium, $150. Add those up and you get $2,480 a month in fixed recurring essentials. But fixed monthly bills aren't the whole picture. And this is exactly the part most people skip when they try to do this math themselves. There are essential costs that don't hit every month, but absolutely happen every year. And pretending they don't exist is how people underbuild their emergency fund without realizing it. Priya added 3 categories here. Car registration and basic maintenance, averaged out monthly, came to about $100. Medical copays and the occasional prescription, even with decent insurance, averaged around $80 a month. And because her job requires specific supplies and occasional continuing education fees, she budgeted $40 a month for that. That's an additional $220 a month in essential costs that are easy to forget, because they don't show up as a recurring line item on a bank statement. Add it all together, $2,480 in fixed bills plus $220 in averaged irregular essentials, and Priya's true monthly essential spending came out to $2,700. 3 months of that is $8,100. She rounded down slightly to a clean $8,000 as her actual target. Notice what just happened. Priya's real number is almost half of the $15,000 you keep hearing quoted as the standard target. That's not because she did the math wrong. It's because the $15,000 figure is built from a national average essential spending number that assumes a higher cost of living than Priya's actual life includes. If she had blindly adopted $15,000 as her target instead of calculating her own number, she would have spent nearly twice as long chasing a target that didn't actually match her real financial exposure. This is the part of the rule that almost never gets explained. $15,000 isn't a target, it's an average result. The actual rule is the process, not the number. Calculate your real essential monthly expenses honestly. Multiply by 3 and use whatever number that produces, even if it's smaller or larger than the one everyone keeps quoting. Here's why almost nobody calculates this themselves, and it's not because the math is hard. The math takes maybe 20 minutes. It's because doing the math requires you to actually look at your real spending, categorize it honestly, and confront a specific number instead of a comfortable vague phrase. Save 3 to 6 months of expenses lets you feel like you're taking the advice seriously without ever having to know exactly what you're aiming for. It's advice designed to be agreed with, not acted on. Priya avoided calculating her real number for 3 years for exactly this reason. Vague felt safer than specific. As long as her emergency fund target stayed undefined, she couldn't fail to hit it. The moment she wrote down $2,700 a month and multiplied it by 3, the target became real, which meant it also became something she could fall short of. That's uncomfortable, but it's also the only way the number becomes useful. Once Priya actually calculated it, something shifted immediately, even before she'd saved a single additional dollar. She had $1,800 sitting in a general savings account. At the time, no specific purpose attached to it. The moment she assigned that money to a real calculated target, $8,000, that same $1,800 stopped feeling like some savings and started feeling like 22.5% of a concrete goal. Same money, completely different psychological weight. She set up an automatic transfer, $400 a month, and did the math on the timeline. Starting from $1,800, closing the remaining $6,200 gap at $400 a month would take about 15.5 months. Call it 16 months to be safe. That's over a year, but it's a target she could actually picture reaching, which is more than 3 years of vague guilt ever gave her. Here's what she didn't fully account for at first, and what almost everyone underestimates about a target of this size. Life doesn't wait quietly for 16 months. About 9 months in, with roughly $5,400 saved, Priya's car needed an alternator replacement, $600, and separately, a dental procedure her insurance only partially covered, another $900. $1,500 total, gone within 6 weeks of each other. 2 years earlier, either of those expenses alone would have gone on a credit card at 22% interest, quietly compounding into a debt that would take months to pay off properly. Instead, Priya paid both in cash from her partially built emergency fund, watched her balance drop back down to $3,900, felt the sting of it, and kept her automatic $400 transfer running anyway. Her real timeline stretched from 16 months to about 20 months, roughly 4 months later than her original estimate, exactly because of that $1,500 setback. But she never went into debt for either expense, which is the entire point of building toward this number in the first place. This is where the rule part actually matters, because it's not just about landing on a specific dollar figure, it's about the process that gets you an accurate one. Calculate your real essential monthly expenses, not your total spending, just what keeps running if your income stopped tomorrow. Include the irregular but essential categories most people forget: car maintenance, medical costs, job-specific expenses, averaged out monthly. Multiply the total by 3 for your minimum floor. Set up an automatic transfer at whatever amount is sustainable, not aspirational, and expect the timeline to be interrupted by real expenses along the way, because it will be, and that's not failure. That's just what having a life while building savings actually looks like. There's also a practical question that almost never gets addressed alongside this rule, which is where this money should actually sit while you're building it. Priya, like a lot of people, initially kept her emergency fund in the same checking account she used for everyday spending, earning essentially zero interest and sitting one impulsive Tuesday away from accidentally getting spent on something unrelated. Both of those are real problems. A standard checking account typically pays close to nothing, often a few hundredths of a percent annually, which means $8,000 sitting there for a year earns you something like $2 or $3 in interest. A high-yield savings account, by contrast, has been paying somewhere in the range of 4 to 5% annually in recent years, which on the same $8,000 works out to roughly $320 to $400 a year, essentially free money for doing nothing except moving where the account lives. The separation matters just as much as the interest rate. Keeping emergency savings in a completely different account, ideally at a different institution than your everyday checking, adds a small but meaningful amount of friction between you and that money. It's not locked away. You can still transfer it in a day or two if you genuinely need it, but it's just inconvenient enough that you won't absent-mindedly dip into it for a nicer dinner or a sale you stumble across online. Priya moved her emergency fund to a separate high-yield account around month 11, right after her setback, partly for the better rate and partly because she wanted a clearer psychological line between money I can spend and money that exists so I never have to panic. Now here's the twist. The part that separates people who use their number as a foundation from people who get stuck there permanently. Once you hit your calculated target, the emergency fund's job is done. It has one job: to sit there, fully funded, covering essential expenses if your income disappears. It is not supposed to keep growing indefinitely past that point, and this is where a lot of naturally cautious savers accidentally sabotage their own progress. Priya hit her full $8,000 target around month 20, right where the setback pushed her. And here's what she almost did next, which is the mistake worth naming directly. She almost kept the same $400 automatic transfer running into the same account indefinitely because stopping felt irresponsible, like she was somehow being less careful with her money. But an emergency fund that keeps growing past its calculated target isn't extra safety. It's money sitting in an account earning close to nothing extra, when it could be earning real returns somewhere else. Once Priya's target was actually met, she redirected that same $400 a month toward a retirement account, instead, letting her $8,000 sit exactly where it needed to, fully funded and untouched, while new money finally started compounding somewhere that could actually grow it. That redirect is the entire reason this number matters, as much as it does. Your calculated target isn't the finish line. It's the number where you're allowed to stop treating every dollar as potential emergency insurance and start treating additional dollars as growth opportunity instead. Most vague financial advice never tells you when to stop doing the thing it told you to do. The actual rule does. Let's talk briefly about why this number varies so much from person to person, because it's not just about income. Someone renting a small apartment in a lower cost of living city might land on essential expenses closer to $2,000 a month, putting their real target closer to $6,000. Someone supporting a family in a higher cost of living area might calculate essential expenses closer to $7,000 a month, putting their real target above $20,000. Both people did the exact same math. Both people are following the exact same rule. They just live different financial lives, which is precisely why borrowing someone else's number, even a commonly repeated one, like $15,000, can leave you either underprepared or unnecessarily anxious about a target that was never actually yours. If you're sitting there right now with vague advice rattling around in your head, save 3 to 6 months of expenses, and you've never actually calculated what that means in dollars, here's what I want you to do. Pull up your actual bank statements. Add up what you spend on essentials only: housing, transportation, food, insurance, minimum debt payments in a normal month. Then add the irregular but essential categories most people forget: car maintenance, medical costs, anything specific to your work or family situation, averaged out monthly. Multiply the total by 3. That number, whatever it turns out to be for you, is your real target. Open a separate high-yield savings account for it if you haven't already, so it earns something while it sits there and stays one small step removed from your everyday spending. For a lot of people living something close to an average life, that number will land somewhere near $15,000. For plenty of others, it won't, and that's exactly the point. The number was never the rule. The process was. If this helped you turn save 3 to 6 months of expenses into an actual number you can work toward, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos that run the numbers nobody else bothers to run.